and record this so that we do have access to this afterwards. So if you have anyone else who would like to listen, or you'd like to listen again, what I'd like to do is introduce Pilar. Pilar and I have known each other. I think we talk about this. Time flies. I think we got together. I went out to her. She's got to talk a little bit about her farm and her community because she really lives a life even from birth. And I went out to her little community farm. Her whole family is there. She was coming up from the farm bringing chicken eggs and kale for our lunch that we had together. But it was a strategy meeting, and that was 7 years ago. And I thought, holy cow, and we've done lots of events since then, but we go back over a decade meeting at Lifetime and just really having the opportunity personally. I think we worked together right on your labs, Pilar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Cindy. I never know how to tell people how we know each other because I feel like it's so many different overlapping roles. And to me, it felt like at Lifetime, we were two people that were a little ahead of where the kind of general corporate consciousness was around nutrition and whole person well-being and functional medicine. And I know it's important to remember that Lifetime, like many health and fitness club companies, were sort of established at the 80s consciousness of going for the burn and, like working out being a way of life. And I think for people like you and me, fitness has always been an activity, and general physical health has been part of a larger picture of how do we live our lives, how do we express ourselves, how do we show up for the people and the projects and the communities that matter for us. So when I met you at Lifetime, I always felt like you were immediately a kindred spirit of sorts. And also I could tell someone I wanted to collaborate with. And we were able to kind of do a few projects together at Lifetime. We worked a little bit on the nutrition philosophy, or that was your project, but I got to be able to be involved with that. And you were such an important source for us with Experience Life magazine. And so over those years, I felt like we got to know each other, and our philosophies were so complementary that then when we both were outside of Lifetime, it just made so much sense that we would find each other again. And connecting our communities like this is really fun for me because I always, I meet new people who are already been primed by your thinking and coaching to perceive their health through a whole new lens and to believe that things are possible that they might not have believed before, just by by virtue of their willingness to do something a little differently than they'd done it before. So we're going to be talking about that tonight too.
And I just have to say, I mean, do you remember how we got reunited after, like post Lifetime? It was at an
No,
IFM
how did that
event,
happen?
an Institute for Functional Medicine event out of town. And by God's grace,
Yes.
we were sitting next to each other in that huge room. And we didn't even
right.
know it. And all of a sudden,
Huge
I'm like,
auditorium.
Mar? Do you remember that? And so then it's been history.
That's perfect. That's so perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, I'm glad we managed to get ourselves together. That's really nice. And I'm so glad to be here talking to you guys all tonight. Cindi and I, well, Cindi, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me into your community and your home. And
Absolutely.
thank you all for having sparing time for this conversation. And my goal for tonight is to share, first of all, just because it's a mixed audience of people who know some of my work pretty well and some who are very new to it. I'm going to spend a little time running through some fundamental concepts of healthy deviance and really explaining what it is so you understand when we talk a little later where I'm coming from, my point of view as a health journalist and as a health seeker, and why I think that it's important to reframe some of our health seeking in this new way. And I'll explain the term healthy deviant and more. But then my hope is that we'll spend at least half of our time, 25 minutes anyway, we're starting about 5 minutes in, talking about what really matters now. And I'd like to make sure we spend time answering your questions and addressing your real interests and needs right now in the moment, because we're living in a very spectacularly unusual time. But I think it's a time of opportunity for us too. And we'll share a little more about why and how to seize the moment. So with that, I'll share my screen and walk you through some slides that I think will help you to understand fundamentally what all this stuff is about. Okay. That's not working very well. Here we go. It's always tricky figuring out how to make things work in Zoom. So some little known essentials of what I call healthy deviance, or the art of being healthy in an unhealthy world. I always like to begin with a definition of terms, because for a lot of people, the term healthy deviant freaks them out a little bit. And I will say, like, when I was going to publish my book and, like shopping this book around to agents and then to publishing companies, a lot of them had a very negative reaction to this word deviant. And I was like, well, I'm trying to reclaim it, and here's why. So the term deviant in our culture generally has a negative connotation. And we think about these people who are deviants as being, sick and, imbalanced and troublesome, potentially criminal, definitely not people you want to hang out with. But in the dictionary term, it's a neutral word, and it just means somebody who differs from a norm and someone whose behavior or attitudes is different from accepted social standards. And I think it's really important to remember that social standards vary from culture to culture, but also from time to time and from era to era. In some presentations, I share a picture of my mother with me when I was a little kid, and she's standing there pregnant with my sister, like 8 or 9 months pregnant, and she's smoking a cigarette. And I always remind people, like, back in the 60s and beyond, it was considered perfectly acceptable for pregnant women to drink and smoke. And just like now, our cultural norms have shifted in the past several years substantially on many, many fronts. That will continue to happen. So I'm making a case for a positive form of deviance that I call healthy deviance. And a healthy deviant is someone who willingly, consciously chooses to defy unhealthy norms and defaults, automatic things, in order to achieve a high level of vitality and resilience and autonomy. And I think one thing that we're seeing with COVID-19, the pandemic, and all of the other things that are sort of converging stresses right now is that many of us are getting an amplified sense of how important our resilience is, and that we can't take our vitality for granted. Because when we lose those things, we lose our autonomy. We're seeing people who are being hospitalized with COVID and COVID-related symptoms who have become completely dependent on a very broken medical system, or on families and friends to take care of them at times in ways that are very stressful for the whole community. So healthy deviance is a form of inspired noncompliance, or what I would say that is a form of innovation. And all innovation, all progress comes from somebody deciding to do something differently. So I'm going to make a case, I hope for you quickly, that will convince you might want to entertain the notion, at least, of becoming a healthy deviant yourself, or perhaps recognizing that you are a healthy deviant, as many health seekers are without knowing it. So what I mean when I say healthy deviance is quite literally deviating from a statistical norm. Like here in the United States, at least 50% of US adults have been diagnosed with at least one chronic illness. Now, the more current term, just from this, or number from this year, is now 60%. That's from the CDC. And it's incredible to me that in the time that it took for me to publish this book and get it out, came out in January, this number has already climbed so substantially. But that's the current condition. 50%, so 60% of US adults diagnosed with a chronic illness. And remember, a bunch of people who have chronic illnesses have not yet been diagnosed, and a whole bunch more people have more than one. So it's a pretty significant number. Then we have 68%, that was the number again when my book came out. Now that's up to 71% of US adults overweight or obese. That more recent number, 71.6, actually is from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey in 2017 and 2018, but reported in the Harvard School of Public Health Journal 2020. 70% are taking at least one prescription drug. And this is an important number because I think it indicates really how many people are actually suffering from symptoms or concerned enough about their health they're taking a prescription drug prophylactically, preventatively, to help manage symptoms that could turn into bigger problems. And I think Cindi and I will both agree, in many cases, people who are taking prescription drugs are doing that to suppress the symptoms of a really significant health problem that's just bubbling up from underneath the surface. And the symptoms are a signal that there's something wrong. But instead of addressing the root cause of that problem, as functional nutrition and functional medicine aim to do, conventional medicine tends to just treat the symptoms or manage the disease state. And that's part of why so many people are taking prescription drugs, including things like antidepressants and antacids, as well as things like biologics and antipsychotics and cholesterol meds and blood pressure meds and more. 80%, though, are not mentally or emotionally thriving or flourishing. And I think that this is a nice way of saying that 80% of people are suffering some level of mental or emotional distress. And that might be chronic stress, depression, anxiety, cognitive impairments, behavioral and other types of mood disorders, incapacity to focus, and so on. And that's a really stunning figure. But I want to point out that that number has actually gotten worse as the result of COVID-19 and the attendant stresses. And there's a lot of data. I'll share a couple of statistics if we have time at the end, just to try to inspire you to understand how challenging our current circumstances are. But the last data that I read suggested that more than 10% of US adults who were surveyed acknowledged that they had considered suicide or had suicidal thoughts in the past 3 months. And that's crazy. 1 out of 10 people are in that frame of mind right now. That's, double or triple where we were at, a year ago. So part of the reason that we're seeing these kinds of frightening statistics has to do with the way we're living and the difficulty of maintaining healthy habits in our unhealthy culture. Currently, 97.3% of US adults are not maintaining even 4 of the most critical healthy behaviors that they would need to have in order to stay healthy and happy for the long haul. And this is almost inconceivable, but these are really basic things like having a reasonably balanced diet. Now, I'll point out that this research looked at healthy nutrition and eating habits in alignment with like the USDA nutrition guidelines, which are not a good standard in my mind. And I think, Cindi, you would agree with me that the USDA nutrition guidelines are not the way we would counsel most people to eat on a regular basis. So I think if you looked at percentages of people who are following the kind of nutrition counsel Cindi Lockhart would give you, it's more like, 99.9% of US adults not maintaining a healthy nutrition habits. But the other factors that they looked at were getting adequate exercise, which they termed 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week of moderate exercise, not smoking, and maintaining a healthy body composition. And there's another place I know that Cindi and I agree is that healthy body composition isn't a habit. Healthy body composition is the outcome of healthy habits, and it's a reflection of a healthy body state in general. And I think that's important because so many people go chasing that composition, not understanding that it's going to be a real struggle to have healthy body composition if you're not actually healthy. So that's crazy, right? Like 97.3% means that less than 3% of US adults are managing these 4 healthy patterns. And it's important to note that they didn't count a lot of really significant factors that are also essential for ongoing health and well-being, including sleep, stress, and social connection. And most of the data that I've read suggests that each of these individually is as important or more important than the factors that they did consider. And that's, saying a lot, but like really, if you are eating well and exercising and you're not sleeping, you're still not going to be healthy. And in fact, you're going to be running a very significant risk of getting a disease and dying much younger than you need to. The same is true of unmanaged stress, which is inflammatory, and social connection. Social connection helps to offset stress and inflammation. But a lot of people don't have a lot of it, particularly right now, where we're separated from each other in so many ways. So when I think about the fact that only a single-digit percentage of the population is currently maintaining the 4 habits that they did count, and I asked myself, how many people are doing those 4 things and sleeping well and getting good social connection and managing their stress well? And I'm like, maybe 1%. And I don't think it's that high. And so if less than a single-digit percentage of the population is currently healthy and happy and on track to stay that way, it means that if you are one of the people who is determined to either reclaim your health and happiness and stay healthy for the long haul, or preserve your health and happiness that you have, you're a single-digit outlier. You are basically a freak of nature in our culture. You are a healthy deviant. And I want to make the point that you don't have to currently be in tip-top shape to be a healthy deviant. In fact, I have a quiz I'll invite you to take later that will help you kind of identify where you're at. Healthy deviance is more about that willingness to defy unhealthy norms and conventions. So it's more of a mindset and a willingness than anything else. But it's important to have that willingness, because what it takes to deviate from the unhealthy norms of our society is really a willingness to depart from the society that produced those results. And I asked this question, like, let's think about this for a minute. What kind of society makes it so hard to be healthy and happy that only a single-digit percentage of its population can pull it off? I think that the answer is fairly obvious, which is not a healthy society. And I always have appreciated this quote from this Indian philosopher, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And Dr. Martin Luther King also made a similar statement when he called for what he called creative maladjustment, which is, being unwilling to conform and comply with a dominant culture that is not working for most of the people in it, and is actually causing a lot of harm. So both Krishnamurti and Dr. Martin Luther King were talking about this in the context of civil rights and social justice. But I think that the health problems we're encountering now are a social justice issue. To have 97.3% or more of people suffering significantly and not able to maintain healthy habits means there's some stuff significantly wrong with our society and the dominant culture we're living in. So I call that society the unhealthy default reality. And this is one of the essential concepts of healthy deviance, which is a framing of our society as a kind of a blobby, parasitic force that likes to reach out and grab at us and pull us in. In the society we live in now, when I say it's an unhealthy default reality, I mean that if you go along with the automatic, easy default choices, and the automatic default perspectives, you end up inside of this machine, of this system that keeps you stuck in it, and it makes it really hard to get out. And if you are on the outside, like I said, it's almost always sort of reaching out and finding ways to grab you, whether through media or other means, getting your attention and getting your resources and sucking you in. So how did we get here? This is a really important question in my mind, because in principle, people create societies for the service of the people in that society. Well, how we got here is kind of a strange set of experiments and accidents that led us to an unprecedented condition. And I say this is like 2.5 million years of human history in about 60 seconds. But I think that it's easier to grasp when you look at it in this pictorial way, meaning that on the left, if you have the dawn of man, 2.5 million years ago, for the vast span of 2.5 million years, humans lived one way, as hunters and gatherers who built their own shelters out of found materials and who were in small communities of people who were completely dependent on each other, all of whom had the same stuff, all of whom had basically the same skills and access to the same resources, and whose survival depended on them getting along and collaborating and cooperating and just agreeing that the priority was survival. And they also had a lot of time together and supported each other in very closely knit groups of people. Well, what happened about 10,000 years ago was the agricultural revolution. And at that time, everything began to change because we domesticated plants and animals and started having surpluses of things, and not just having year-round supplies of this stuff. Allowed us the luxury of specializing in what we did. It allowed us to accumulate surpluses of wealth and resources and trade them with each other. So it changed everything about our culture. And ultimately, long story, 2.5 million year long story short, it led to accelerating change in technology and social structures. We moved from small villages into towns and then cities. And we had the Industrial Revolution, where we suddenly had steam-powered machinery and automatic mass-produced things about 200 years ago, which was the blink of an eye in terms of our evolutionary history. Our DNA never has changed that much. And then we had even more accelerating change as the result of that technological change. 60 years ago, the technological revolution, where the first computers and push-button appliances and things became much more common. Technology became household. level. Everyone has it. And then just 25 years ago, we got the digital revolution. I was looking for my iPhone, which I normally have on me. But like we have these things connected to us almost all the time now, digital devices and laptop computers, and then artificial intelligence and all of the things that have come out of microchips. But 25 years ago, that's like half my lifetime. So I spent half of my entire life as a child growing up learning how to live in this world without any of that. And I, like many people, are still figuring out how to live with this converging set of technologies as well as environmental change. We have toxins that are pervasive in our environment inside of our bodies. Every man, woman, and child in the United States of America is carrying toxins in our systems and our cells that don't belong to us. We're not put there with our permission. And this is changing our physiology in all sorts of ways, but also changes like electric lights and social changes that have to do with how much media we consume and how. How many people saw that movie, The Social Dilemma, about how social media is affecting us? It's really fascinating documentary and kind of scary. But my point here is that we are the first generation, even as adults, the first generation in the history of humanity to be living the way we're living now. So there is no precedent for this. We are living an experiment. We are living experiments. I have a podcast called The Living Experiment with my friend Dallas Hartwig, all about this. Like, how do you learn to be healthy in this kind of world? No one is around to show you how to do it successfully, except people like Cindi and me and Kathleen and people who are basically Mandy, who are kind of learning it by hook and by crook and making a whole career out of like figuring it out. But we're also figuring it out for ourselves. And every year is a little different because every year it changes. So in the context of this, I want to talk briefly about willpower and the limits of willpower in those kinds of circumstances. Because it is true, and we're told a lot how important willpower is to our life chances and success. But there are real limits of willpower when you're living in an environment that exposes us to as many unprecedented stresses as the ones we're talking about now. In my book, I talk about what I call the vicious cycle of the unhealthy default reality. And really quickly, I'll just explain it in short order. Basically, the way we're living in the unhealthy default reality presents us with easy, automatic, mostly unhealthy choices. Those automatic unhealthy choices predictably lead to unhealthy default reality problems. And then the society presents us with solutions to those problems, whether they're diets and exercise routines, or green juice detoxes, or prescription pills and powders and other things. When we try to embrace those solutions, we typically find they don't work as well as advertised, or as well as we might have hoped. And it kind of takes us into this cycle of trying and failing and trying and failing and trying a lot of different things and not having them work, and then beating up on ourselves. Self-blame and shame and inadequacy come out of that try and fail cycle. And that set of experiences leads to something called ego depletion, which is basically just wearing yourself out and feeling diminished as the result of that. Chronically, though, it also leads you to have the experience of not being able to bring as much what we call willpower to bear. Now, there's a lot of conflicting research about this, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, except to say many of you have probably had the experience of noticing that under stress at the end of a really long day, you're more inclined to go for an extra drink or have an extra cupcake, or find yourself in front of the open refrigerator going, I'm hungry for something and I don't even know what it is. It's kind of that feeling of ego depletion at work. It leads us to feel more vulnerable and also to be more reactive emotionally. And that can lead us into that desperate kind of poor me mindset of just like, I don't know how to make this work. Why am I so stupid? How come nothing ever works for me? And that sets us up to make more automatic default choices. So this is the problem with willpower. They've done some studies on what they call restrained eating. Restrained eaters are those who very consciously tightly regulate what they are eating at any given time. And this is true of many of us who are health seekers, right? Because in order to be healthy in the unhealthy default reality, we have to figure out ways of limiting what we're eating and restraining ourselves. The problem is the studies that they've done show that folks who consistently restrain their eating through tightly regulated controlled measures end up with cognitive costs. They literally have so much focus going toward making their decisions about what they're eating that they have diminished cognitive capacity. And they tend to be less capable of going through all of the routines we need to do, like reading the nutrition ingredients and thinking about, like, really, does this choice serve me? We just rely on front of label things like wholesome, cholesterol free, fat free, low calorie, good housekeeping seal of approval. We get so overwhelmed, we're just like, fine, I'll take this. And sometimes it actually leads us to choose things that are not in line with the choices we want to be making. So it's a strange set of circumstances where the society sets us up to have to make these very difficult decisions under circumstances where we're already stressed out. And then just the sheer effort of controlling our behaviors and choices wears us out more. It's really a vicious cycle. So if you're interested in more about restrained eating, let me know in the questions and answer period, and I'll read you a little piece about that. But I want to also let you know that there is hope. You don't have to go down that rabbit hole. There's a way out. I call it the virtuous cycle of healthy deviance. And it's sort of the inverse of the vicious cycle, where instead of going with an automatic choice, you begin by building your awareness of what is triggering your choices. What makes you want to eat Cheetos? At what points are you tempted to have a third glass of wine? Why is it you're getting home feeling so strung out? Well, not even getting home, getting off of Zoom. Have anybody noticed that, like, if you do 5 Zoom things in a row, your mind is just like a husk of its former self? Like, I can barely string together a sentence at the end of this day. Like, all of that technology, all of that media, it takes a toll on us. So amplified awareness is about noticing what's going on within you and also around you, what patterns lead you to certain behaviors and which ones lead you out of them. Willingness is about having the choicefulness to make and try different things, even though it's not about willpower. It's about not the white-knuckled kind of like willpower. It's about, okay, today I'm willing to try this a little differently. I'm willing to experiment. All of that leads to a more empowered set of choices and behaviors, including a very important one, a habit I call preemptive repair. The 3 things in yellow that you see here on this little chart are what I call the nonconformist competencies of healthy deviance. And preemptive repair is the art of getting ahead of the damage that's done to you just by virtue of living in this very stressful, pro-inflammatory, toxic culture of ours. So if you learn those skills of getting ahead of the damage and repairing yourself and building yourself back up, you get more energy and focus and capacity and resilience. That leads you to a condition where you're more open to learning new skills. You have enough surplus to be able to learn, like go to things like this and hear new ideas and try new stuff out. Being willing to then experiment with that in your real life leads you to better outcomes, including increased autonomy, the willingness, the ability to do what you want to do, and agency, the ability to act in your own service, in the service of your own goals. So how you go about doing this, though, when let's say 1% of people are managing it, is a bit of a trick. So I think it's important to talk about the survival skills of this current time. Again, our ancestors had survival skills like learning how to hunt and gather and build shelters and make fire and find water. It's maybe still important skills, but in our era, I consider the most essential ones to be the nonconformist competencies of healthy deviance that I just told you a little bit about, namely amplified awareness, building up your capacity to notice what's going on in your environment and within your own body. Like, what's going on when you eat something? Does it make you feel good or not so good? Does your energy last or does it go up and then crash? Cindi is great about drawing people's attention to the impacts that their food choices and their lifestyle choices have in their everyday lives. So that's amplified awareness. Preemptive repair is, again, getting ahead of the damage that's done to you. This is about sleeping before you're exhausted, safeguarding the time that you have for rest and repair cycles. It's about taking breaks before you've lost your mind on Zoom. It's about asking for what you need in order to take care of yourself, self-care. Drinking water before you get dehydrated. How many people have a glass of water somewhere near them right now? Yeah? Hey, nice. Feel free to glug away while I'm talking. Rehydrate preemptively. So lots of different ways of doing preemptive repair. Some of it is physical, some of it's mental and emotional, spiritual, social, and so on. And then continuous growth and learning is really about being open to expanding your knowledge and skill set constantly over time, not feeling stupid because you don't know it already. Again, when I said before, we're the first generation in the history of humanity to be trying to live the way we're living in these circumstances. No wonder none of us has it figured out. We got to be gentle with ourselves, but also retain that curiosity and that willingness to try new things. So this to me is really a growth mindset. That's what they call it in positive psychology. And it's just accepting you can't learn it all at once. It's going to be a lifetime of growth and learning, and that's good. So learning about food, learning about movement, learning about stress and sleep and all of the other things you might need to know. But if I were to break it down and say there's just the single most essential survival skill of right now, where we are in this moment in history, I would say it's mojo preservation. And by that I mean a willingness to safeguard your own capacity on a given day, within a given hour, even in 15-minute cycles. What do you need to do to avoid becoming depleted, reactive, vulnerable, inflamed, or otherwise out of control? Because that number that I shared with you before about the doubling or tripling of people who are experiencing mental and emotional stress or disorders, really mental health issues, or the 1 out of 10 people that have like suicidal thoughts, this is the most important thing, more important than achieving your ideal weight or doing the workout of the day, more important than turning in, the best possible presentation to your boss, really becomes this ability to maintain and preserve your own energy reserves so that you don't get run down and become vulnerable and have your immune system crap out on you or go on overdrive, which is what's happening to a lot of people. So where to begin in all of this? I'll share with you just a nickel tour of the Renegade rituals that have worked for me. These are the things that I talk about in my book as being the significant interventions that have helped me to be able to make then healthy choices about my food and my activity and my sleep cycles, kind of the precursors to those. The first is something I call the morning minutes practice. And it's very, very simple. It's just taking the first 3 minutes when I wake up in the morning, before I open my computer and look at the news, before I look at my phone and my social media or my texts or my messages. I take 3 minutes and I light a candle, just like this, a little beeswax candle. And I keep it handy. I travel with a small one when I go anywhere, which I don't go very many places these days, but I light a beeswax candle and I spend 3 minutes doing something I enjoy to come to my waking state gradually before I do anything else. And I will tell you that that practice has made the biggest difference in every other part of my healthy habit setting in my life. And part of it is very scientifically explicable, that it has to do with your brainwave state when you wake up and how vulnerable you are in that in between sleeping and waking state. Some of it is just this sort of tiny steps methodology of creating one small positive change in the morning that's foundational, that sets me up for a different mindset. And part of it is just remembering what it's like to have the autonomy to choose for myself how I want to show up in my day. Once I've made one small, healthy, pleasurable, good experience happen, it's much more likely I'm going to set myself up for success with the other ones. So ultradian rhythm breaks is the second, and I describe all of these in greater detail. We can talk about them at the break, but this is the habit of taking 20-minute breaks every hour and a half or so. And I'm going to explain a little bit about why that is, and that's important, but this is one of the most significant things I've done for maintaining my focus and my energy, and also keeping my blood sugar regulated, keeping myself in a place of like conscious choices, not getting run down. When I talk about mojo preservation, ultradian rhythm breaks are probably my best biohack that I can offer you. Every 90 to 120 minutes, your body needs some downtime to replenish, repair, and rebalance itself. We'll talk about how to do that if you want. Nighttime wind down is sort of the end of the day routine I have of bringing down the lights in my house, bringing down the temperature in my space, bringing down the volume of any media in my environment, shutting down my screens. Everything goes down. Energy in the space goes down. I've even been known to light a candle while I'm brushing my teeth and washing my face and doing, I call it my evening ablutions. And I make a little ritual out of taking care of myself. But there's really an important part of this, which is creating a digital sunset where you start turning computers and TVs and things off, getting away from the screens. It isn't just the blue light, although I think that's important. I think it's also about the stimulation and about the mindset of all of the things that are happening and going on that you're asking your brain to make sense of. And you just need to chill yourself down gradually in order to have a good night's sleep. Otherwise, you go to bed and you're overstimulated. So I want to make a point here very quickly that every single thing in nature works in these repeating oscillations and waves. And our river systems, you can see it from above if you look down on an airplane, make this wave, heart rhythms, brain waves, plants, animals, everything has a very similar wavelength. But somehow in our unhealthy default reality, we've been convinced that how we should work is get up and go, 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 and then drop off to sleep. And what that sets up for us is a real disconnect between how we actually work and how we've been told we're supposed to work. How we work is as just everything else in nature. We have a very predictable rhythm that we follow energetically. And if you pay attention, you'll notice this is true. You go through phases where you get kind of exhausted and worn out, and phases where you feel pretty good. And it isn't just at the beginning of the day that you have energy. But the truth is, if you don't follow your ultradian rhythms, you tend to get diminishing returns and body-mind discord. A bunch of bad things happen. When we don't pay attention to these natural rhythms, what happens is something I call pissed off body syndrome. This is like basically how your body tells you it does not like the way you're living. And I have a long thing in my book I call the weird symptom checklist. And it's probably something that if you work with Cindi, you've run through too. Of like any rashes, any irritations, digestive trouble, headaches, joint pain, sneezing, coughing, blah, 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 itchy ears. Pissed off body syndrome can be, any range of disorders, some diagnosable, some not. But that's what happens when our bodies don't like the way we're living, whether by what we're eating, how we're moving, the energy system, whether or not we're respecting those oscillating rhythms. So there's one more concept I won't have a lot of time to go into, but I do want to say that the experience of pissed off body syndrome for a lot of people is part of this bigger experience I call the Healthy Deviant Hero's Journey. And it's really a kind of experience that's similar to the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talked about, that's in the mono myth that's represented in everything from Star Wars, to all of the superhero stories. But basically, we begin in a natural state, and as we comply with our unhealthy culture, we go downhill and we start to get sicker and less happy and eventually hit bottom in this place of darkness where the pissed off body syndrome and pissed off mind syndrome sort of converge. And I think that's what gets people to a very dark place sometimes. And, if you're lucky, you bounce and you start figuring out that you can't do it the way you've been told to do it. You have to deviate or diverge. Often that leads to a state that I call rebellion, where you're like, why did no one explain this to me before? This is messed up. It shouldn't be this hard. And then eventually leads you to a place I call healthy deviance, which is a more sustainable, rewarding place to be. And that's important because you can wear yourself out being angry and it doesn't get you very far. So what can you do now? Basically, I'm going to make the case that you can break the rules or break yourself. That's kind of your set of options. And I want to really encourage you to think about challenging the rules that have gotten you to a difficult place, or be willing to challenge the norms around you that are setting you up for struggle. In my book, I offer a Healthy Deviant manifesto. It's just a really simple 3-point manifesto. And the very first point is be willing to subvert the unhealthy default reality. Be willing to challenge those unhealthy norms. If there's a TV blaring in a restaurant where you're trying to eat, ask to have it turned down. If there's someone trying to shove another meeting into a 2-packed schedule, be willing to suggest that maybe it can wait. If someone is trying to stick an unhealthy cupcake in your face and you'd really rather eat something else, eat something else. Next, call out the crazy. Be willing to acknowledge where you see the crazy in our culture. I often see this in the media and in the idealized body images and the things that we're told we're supposed to have and be and do and look like. I often point out to people that the magazine covers on most health and fitness magazines are completely insane. People don't have bodies like that. And most of the headlines are just absolutely nuts. There's one in my collection where it says 860 moves for a hot upper body. Like, who has time to do 860 moves for anything, much less just an upper body? And then the final one, and we'll leave it here for tonight, is to make it a party, which is to say, I really think that healthy living should be fun and it should feel good enough that other people want to come and join you at this party. If we make healthy living such a chore and such an exercise in self-denial that it really looks like a slog and a miserable time, nobody's going to want to do it, including us over the long haul. And one thing I love about Cindy's advice too is like acknowledging that pleasure is an important part of health. Having fun, being supported by other health seekers, not getting down on yourself for every time you take a step back. It's really about positivity and experimentation in the service of figuring it out as you go. So with that, I will leave you with this urgent encouragement. If you are at all interested in the idea of healthy deviance, think about it as a kind of ongoing escape effort. You will get sucked back in over and over again. You just got to keep on making your way out. So I promised you this quiz, which you can take. It's at healthydeviant.com. You'll find a little quiz option in the navigation, or you can just go to healthydeviant.com/quiz. And it's about 20 questions that will help you kind of wrap your head around your own position on the healthy deviant spectrum, as I call it, and also give you a little bit more sense about what healthy deviance is about. Some of the questions might surprise you, and your score might surprise you, but I'm interested in finding out. Tell me if you do take it, come back and report or post on social media what your score is. You can also read my book if you're interested, and there's a Healthy Deviant Facebook group where there's more than 1,000, maybe 2,000 people now collecting and supporting each other in healthy deviance. So that's it. And I want to make sure we leave some time for questions and talk a little bit more about the parts of this that are interesting to you. I'll throw it back to you, Cindi. Let me get this. How do I stop share? There we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pilar. I mean, I hold on. Let me get into gallery view. I'm going to unmute everyone. I mean, I've worked with, I've heard Pilar's work for so long, and every time, I always come out with something new, and just how does it apply to my life? How does it apply to my client's life? So I just love it. I hope it inspired you too. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone. Hold on, need to use my cheaters. Make sure everyone is, let's see. I think I have to do it individually. So if I'm asking you to unmute, just to encourage you to go ahead and unmute, because I want you to take advantage of having Pilar here to ask questions and also to share, what has been your struggles over this time? Because I know, in this pandemic time, it's hard. I mean, we know social connectedness is important. This is how we socialize now, is on Zoom. And it's not the same. We can't give that nice bear hug that I love to give every single person. So I have to learn my my boundaries here. So go ahead. Please, anyone who has a question or comment. So I think I've asked everyone to unmute. If I didn't, just raise your hand.
Yeah, and I want to say too, I'm really interested in hearing back from you the extent to which you found this to be the case. I mean, for those of you who have been seeking health and working on your own health and well-being, or advocating for other people's health and well-being, I have found that the social factors are really not addressed often enough, and we tend to point toward personal responsibility and individual choices. But I'm curious, to what extent have you noticed that as you've made healthy choices or struggled to make healthy choices, that a lot of the obstacles you run into have to do with lack of support in your social group or in the environments like, work or play, or hi, Tatiana, I see you there on your phone, another health coach. And I'm opening this up to the coaches and practitioners in the audience too. It's like, we also get trained to address people at the level of their individual habits. And I think it's really interesting to think about, what if we started thinking about this less as my problem or your problem and more as our problem? How could we make it more, I guess, realistic in addressing the real root problems of our unhealthy culture, the food that's available or not, the patterns we're expected to observe, of overwork and undersleep, and all, just the setup of the unhealthy default reality. Does that strike you guys as familiar? I mean, does it seem true to you, or are you supported in communities that are really different?
Yeah, I can actually just add here and kind of like maybe start the conversation, and hopefully everybody else will have some more questions. But hi, I'm Tatiana, and I'm a health coach as well. And I actually work in corporate right now, and I have a pretty high stress job. And what I have noticed lately with the social distancing and people from home and just having kids in the house at the same time, education, schools, and all that stuff, and having the responsibility of being a mother, I have noticed that I have been depleted. I have noticed that I have felt overwhelmed and mentally exhausted on some days, and I acknowledged it. And what I noticed that at the same time, though, from the company standpoint, we know how much right now the digital business is growing. Like everybody's going in digital. So that requires more attention from managers to manage that, because that's like the reality that the full corporate world is working on. So everybody wants to become more personable. Everybody wants to drive more sales through online. And that puts extra responsibilities and extra pressure on people. And what I have noticed in the corporate world is that the standards are rising. So everybody asking for you to do more, but at the same time, the standards at the house are rising as well, and everybody's asking you to do more at home. And so there's this more and more kind of inequality standards are happening. Especially, I noticed that as being a parent versus people who don't have children, and they put up more hours from 7 till like 9 p.m. They don't go out anymore, drink a drink out with their friends because there is social distancing, but they don't have responsibilities in the house to do the dinner, to take care of your children and things like that. And so that inequality in its core, I really noticed. And I started searching articles, and I found a ton of articles in New York Times just said women are under pressure more than ever. And I know my company right now takes more stands in that equality issues, but I actually started talking about this. First, I thought it was very unfair. And first, my manager was pushing me to do more. And then I decided I'm going to go to HR and I'm going to talk about it, because if I don't talk about it, nobody else will change. Nothing else will change. It was very scary for me to do that at the first. But like you said, call out all this stuff. Like, call it out. If you feel there's unhealthy deviant or unhealthy reality happening around you, call out. It was very scary for me to go to HR. Honestly, I went, I talked about it, I documented it, and I felt like put myself in a more secure situation as well. But at the same time, then I saw that my HR started to do some like trainings and like sending some like more information, mental well-being for health.
Yeah.
It started from somebody. So that's what I noticed. And observation that I wanted to share. On top of that, digital era, this 2020 digital era is like on steroids.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is. And one thing before I just respond to that briefly, Cindi, I don't know if it's Tatiana's microphone or something else, but there's a real, like almost a sandy sound. Like, I think we should mute microphones unless someone is speaking, just so we don't end up with too much background noise. So Tatiana, I think it's really great that you
just do a thumbs up if you want to speak, and I'll unmute you.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, you're muted, Pilar.
There we go. Thank you. The willingness to call out the crazy and to sort of, it's like the emperor has no clothes, that if everyone is agreeing to go along with the insanity, it just keeps on being crazy. And then we individually feel like there's something wrong with us, that we're struggling. There is no way that we will be able to maintain what we're doing right now. And the sooner I think people are willing to raise their hand and say, look, the data speak for themselves. And this is not in any organization's really long-term best interest to be functioning this way. They need human beings to come to the table. And it is going to take brave people. It will take people who have the privilege of some security or the willingness or the capacity to do it initially. But I think we have to follow our own instincts about what's possible for us and what we're energized to do in a given moment. I will also say, oftentimes it is the healthier people who have got enough resilience and capacity and vitality and clarity to be able to speak the truth. Because by the time, as I said, you get run down and depleted, you're in no condition to challenge the status quo. And that's one of my like fundamental reasons I do this work. It's like, I want to live in a world with healthy and happy people. It's going to be a better world for all of us. But it's going to take healthy, happy people to challenge the norms and to solve the problems that we're facing. So good for you. And you're going to have an amazing story to tell either way about what happens inside your organization. So please keep us informed. That's really fantastic. Okay, anybody else who wants to offer a comment or a question about this or an experience? Yolanda, I see the thumbs up. Let's hear from Yolanda.
So, hello, my name is Yolanda, and I'm a fitness professional. What that means is I do it all except teach yoga.
Except yoga.
But
draw the line at yoga.
But because I go by the name Yo, aka Coach Yo, it kind of fits. So I kind of feel like maybe yoga's coming.
It's coming.
Maybe yoga's coming. Oh my gosh, Pilar, I am over here feeling like 150,000,000% convicted and responsible. I know that it's not, I know that it's not my responsibility to save the world, but when I tell you that I get it, oh my gosh, this is my calling. Right. So there's a long story, but I started back with Bally Total Fitness.
Remember those Bally's? I worked out at Bally's. Oh yes. Going for the burn. Weren't we all going for the burn at Bally's? I'm pretty sure.
and I get it. I feel responsible. And now, like, oh, she left. I forgot what Tatiana. What she was saying is that now everything's going virtual. And I'm very much a people person. So now I get to create ways for people to figure out fitness and then keep them safe. And it's a challenge. I even experienced a little bit of, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to teach one more live again? And then I figured, okay, I have to provide some Zoom, because it was just starting to kind of, I don't know what the right word it is for it. But when you say those numbers increased with just like mental health things, I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to pull away from this. Like, this is like, this is, so right now I'm just doing Zoom, and I kept all of the content from my classes. So thankfully I'm able to pull away. But it's a challenge. And I think that part of my business name is Go Yo Go Fitness is it's about me kind of being honest and telling my story and being authentic about what I'm experiencing just as a human being, to help other people see that, their mental health matters, their spiritual health matters, all of these things matter, connection matters. And so I spoke with Cindi a few days ago, and I'm like, man, this is more than about burpees. This is about humanity trying to keep us all, I hate to say just keep people alive, but I get and realize how important it is for me to make sure that if I'm sending a link for a Zoom class, that thing is consistent, that I'm consistent as I'm a good example for them. This isn't about perfection. But this is about me being in the lane that I've been called to be in, and trying to be the best servant that I can in that way. So thankful to, I was writing notes, lots of notes. Maybe I'll just have to get your book. But I would say I'm a part of that freak category. I'm going, oh my gosh, that's me. But how do I take people with me?
Yeah.
Like, how do I bring how do I pull them out of the gunk? Right.
Oh my God. That's a great way of putting it. Well, I mean, I think the first thing, it just really strikes me, like in terms of amplified awareness, I love the way you said, that, like that first instinct of like, ugh, it's just not feeling good. And we've been taught to shut that instinct up or believe there's something wrong with us rather than like, oh, that's a signal from my system. And just knowing that and sharing that, and like whether it's in fitness or anything else, encouraging people to honor where they're at and to not overdrive their capacity at a given time, I think is so important. And Cindi and I were talking about this, like Peloton sales are up. And, on the one hand, yay, people are working out at home and staying active. On the other hand, Peloton and spinning, and it's a very aggressive form of exercise, the way that it's been, promoted at least. It's like, push yourself, go over the goal, keep up with the instructor, hit the number. And I think in a stressed out state, sometimes that's the last thing that people need. They think it manages stress because it does give them kind of a moment of a runner's high or a biker's high. But in many cases, like their bodies aren't repairing the damage that they're doing through that much stress. So when you say you can feel about that, doing the Facebook Lives or whatever it is, like you're hitting your limit and your body is intelligent enough, and probably because you're trained as an athlete and as a professional to pay attention to your body, to know that's not the right thing. That's not the feeling of a body like going toward a better experience. It's like, yeah. So I really, first of all, you're obviously a healthy deviant. That's great. I want to encourage you to get there's a free preview of my book at my website that has the first chapter or two. And so check that out. And if you like it, I mean, it's available, like everywhere. But also the podcast, Living Experiment, The Living Experiment, which is at livingexperiment.com, is full of a ton of audio that's great for people. If you want to listen to it like on walks or, while you're folding laundry or doing something else, that can be fun too. The audiobook isn't out yet for my book, but a bunch of stuff is. There's an episode of The Living Experiment called Healthy Deviants 2. And that I walk people through almost everything. It's in the book. And so that would be a good one to listen to. Maybe I can post that I'll post that in the chat while Cindi is chatting us up, or anybody else has another thought. But thank you so much for carrying that. Coach Healthy Deviants Unite. I love it.
Yes. Well, and that's what I was just going to say. I mean, Yolanda, you've got such a blessing in that, number one, like with the stats that Pilar shared about mental health, we know that exercise is the best treatment for mental health, right? For depression, especially. And so for you to also now take in the cat, so in regards to also taking advantage of this pandemic, and like now you can't be live, you can't be doing these classes and these trainings in person. So you adapted, you pivoted. And so you're a healthy deviant in that you found, how do I make this work virtually? So that is so important. I do want to share, like one of the participants did send a question through chat, Pilar, about where do you start when you're at rock bottom?
Well, I think first of all, that is that point at the bottom of that Healthy Deviant Heroes journey where you're in darkness is about coming to an acceptance that you don't want to keep living this way and that it's going to take some effort and time and energy to diverge. Then comes the willingness to experiment. So, we talked about that virtuous cycle of healthy deviance. It starts with amplified awareness. Everybody has a different version of bottom, but if you're experiencing enough pain that you no longer want to feel that way, then the next step is willingness to do some things differently. Not everything all at once, not a perfect person, healthy lifestyle, not the bodies and lifestyles of the rich and famous, but like, how can I begin? Where am I willing to make some change? Where am I ready to embrace some change? Cindi and I both, I think, subscribe to this notion of readiness to change, that it proceeds through phases. Like pre-contemplation is when you're not even thinking about it. Contemplation is when you're thinking about it. Then there's preparation, where you begin readying yourself for this next steps of taking action. Then you move into action. And a lot of times in our culture, we emphasize people going directly from contemplation straight to action. And I think it's really great. Like if you have been living one way for a long time or for most of your life, acknowledging that it's going to be a small set of shifts. Those, like the morning minutes practice for me, when I say that it was the most significant change that I've made, I will tell you, I've now taught thousands of people to do the morning minutes practice. And inevitably what I hear back is, oh my God, this is changing my life. Like, this is changing everything for me, because it's a simple practice. It's 3 minutes in the morning. Are you capable of getting up and spending 3 minutes on yourself to do something that's pleasurable, that helps you come to waking? It might be stepping outside and smelling the air. It might be petting a dog or a cat, or playing a musical instrument, or drawing, or journaling, or reading, or just looking into that. If you light a candle, just look at a beeswax candle and smell a natural beeswax candle. It's wonderful. You can get one for like $2, a votive, But anything that you can do for the first 3 minutes in the morning that's a success will set you up for additional healthy choices. And understand it may take some preparation time. You may not dive into it all at once. In fact, I would suggest not diving into everything all at once. Trying to shift your diet and your exercise and your sleep and your, it's too much to take on. So decide, I would say there's like an overlapping Venn diagram of like all of the possible choices in the world over here, and then your personal priorities and needs, and what's making you feel either motivated or desperate that makes something feel urgent. And what you're energized to do now is just in that little overlapping space. And right now it may literally be one little thing you're willing to try changing. But if you do that one thing, that space will grow. That would be my counsel.
And I love that. And especially because, to the point of like the 3 minute morning minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know with a lot of my clientele, we're super busy, especially now working from home. We're zoomed out. Like, I love that graph. It's perfect. That's why I tell people, like, we step on that accelerator as soon as we wake up, and we don't let off until we hit the bed at night.
Yeah.
And so that's perfect. And so we think 3 minutes, how am I going to fit 3 minutes into my day? But I will convince people, say, like, all you can do is try it. And it's amazing when you even take 3 minutes, maybe even 5, maybe even 8, all of a sudden you've got so much more time in the day. And that's because you've set that day right. And you've established this new mindset.
Yeah.
And you're actually more protective and focused.
I think that's right. And even more than more time in your day, there's more you in your day. And sometimes we're just missing from our own lives. Like, we are so on call for what everyone else's priorities are and the demands of the unhealthy default reality. We can go days or weeks or months or years without actually connecting to ourselves in any meaningful way. So, the 3 minutes ideally grows to 5 and 10 and 30. And eventually it's almost like you have to build up a tolerance to being present for yourself in your own life in a culture that makes that a very strange thing to do. But the more you do it, the more power you take back, the more you disrupt the unhealthy default reality, and the easier it gets, the more fun it gets. It's an amazing thing to experience yourself as a living human being and realize, I haven't shown up for myself as just my own person for this long. A lot of people cry the first time they do it, because the other thing, I'll warn you, not sad tears, but a sense of like, oh my God, I'm feeling a lot that I'm not letting myself feel. And when I create space to feel it, I suddenly realize how much of an appetite I have for my own life back.
Yeah.
And I wanted to respect the time and give people back to their lives and their evenings, since we're about 5 minutes after the hour right now. But yeah, there's more resources for those who want them. Like I said, I just posted the link to the Healthy Deviants 2 episode of the Living Experiment and the Morning Experiment. And I will link to the quiz at healthydeviant.com in case folks decide they want to take that. If you go to the healthydeviant.com site, also there's a link for a free preview of my book. And that is like, an easy free download. You can read it on a PDF on your computer. You don't have to print it if you don't want to. But it contains all those charts and some other goodies that you might enjoy. So I'll provide that as the last link as well. Anything else I can do to set you guys on your merry way?
Well, and I think we'll post this video as well as all of those links to YouTube. So we'll have that up there. We may post a few snippets also on some other social media channels, but we'll make sure that everyone has that. But certainly check out you got to take the quiz. Got to start with the quiz. See where you sit in regards to your healthy deviant way of living. And thank you so much, Pilar. Always a welcome and a gracious time to be with you and learning and just empowering us and inspiring us.
Well, thank you. It was such a pleasure to connect with all of you. Healthy Deviants Unite. Go yo. All of that. Thanks so much for having me,
everyone.
Cindi. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.